Easy Sports Talk Show with Ed Smith and Javon Adams. My name is Javon Adams. You can call me Jay or J Love. And that man next to me on that side, he is the one and only Ed Smith. He not only played professional baseball, but also played in the National Football League for that first Super Bowl bound team for the Atlanta Falcons. He is a professional speaker. He is also an author. What is good, my brother?
Hey man, just one day closer to camps opening up and football being back for real. Doesn't it seem like just yesterday we had the Super Bowl? No.
No, no. But you concerned yourself or busied yourself with watching all that spring football and all that, didn't
Oh no, I didn't catch any of that. But
you?
just like I said, can't believe. But yeah, camps are getting ready to open up, and before you know, we'll have some preseason games, and next thing you know, we'll be walking into the regular season. I can't believe we're mid-July already, past the mid-July mark.
Yes, indeed. So yeah, we'll be
Crazy.
definitely starting really start probably in earnest next week, really diving into some of these stories that are out there. But there are a couple things that I wanted to get into that I believe you have experience with both. And so hopefully I know one I'm probably right and the other we'll see. But the thing that I wanted to start off with first is so with the NBA, so we know we're in the off season of the NBA, and a lot of the top players are getting ready or they're playing those warm up games for the Olympics. But there's been a lot with the newest CBA about the aprons. You hear about the first apron, second apron, and all that. And I wanted to get your thoughts on this a little bit on maybe where this might be going. And so for those that don't know, I'm not going to try to have your eyes glaze over a little bit, but I'll give you kind of a little bit, maybe a thumbnail or just a surface level thing. So for the longest time, there was just one tax apron, right? So that was one of those things where if you went over that apron, the Lakers used to do this all the time, especially when they were building teams, and the Warriors did this for quite a few years. So if you got over it, you pay a luxury tax, right? And then eventually you might end up losing maybe the ability to have one of those mid-level exceptions. With the second apron, it's a lot more constricting. So it prevents you from making a lot of moves, just to suffice it to say, making a lot of moves and not being able to have that mid-level exception. And so it really locks you in to what your team is and very limited options. And so even teams that are willing to owners that are willing to spend like a Steve Ballmer, or it was the Lakers with the Warriors, or in some other squads, they're not they're not willing to go to that second apron, go above that, because then it gets really small. The Suns owner, he seems to be willing to do that for whatever reason. But I wanted your thoughts on this. With the way that this has started to unfold. What Silver, the commissioner for the NBA, had a kind of a press conference yesterday or in the last couple of days, and was asked about what he thinks the impact of this is. And so it's kind of still a work in progress, so to speak. But I think it's going to end up being a lot like the NFL with their salary cap, because oftentimes when you can only go so far before you got to start paying everybody this money, and then you got to tear your team down and try to build it back up. And I'm thinking it might be one of those things where, let's say, if you have a Victor Wembanyama, you better within the first 3 or 4 years better be contending for either a conference championship or trying to get to the finals before you have to start paying these different guys and then maybe tear it down to build it up, or maybe have more fiscal responsibility, which is easier said than done. And I just want your thoughts on it.
Yeah, in a lot of instances, man, the behind the scenes and most valuable player of a lot of these organizations are the economists, because
Yeah.
I mean, understanding the salary caps and the penalties and the luxury taxes and things like that alone is a mystery to me. I me personally, I would like just a hard cap
Mm-hmm.
and no exceptions, because when you start making exceptions, what happens is the teams that don't care about going over the exceptions and are just going to pay the luxury tax or whatever the next penalty is, like you said, the next aprons and stuff like that, they're just going to do it. We saw that with the Golden State Warriors for a little bit. They were just like, well, we got to keep our nucleus together, and if that means paying a luxury tax, so be it. And they were offering money to their core three plus, maybe a player or two, and going well over the tax limit and paying on that. But what's the penalty for that is winning championships.
Hmm.
So so
Hmm.
they kind of showed you, we're going to take this penalty, but meanwhile we're going to make a boatload of more money because our stands are going to be full. We're going to charge premium for a glass of beer and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because who pays in on the backside, who pays for the taxes? The fans themselves.
Right.
When the teams go over the luxury tax, they politely inform you that, hey, there's going to be a slight increase in ticket prices and concessions, and we hope you will understand this. At the meantime, they're basically telling you, hey, there's a price. If you want a championship team here, there's a price for it. Now the problem comes when teams spend recklessly over it, don't
Yeah.
get the championships, put themselves at a disadvantage for multiple years afterwards, because there's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. When you spend, like for instance, what the Suns did, you go out and give three guys max contracts, and you don't maximize on their efforts on the court. And I mean, now you're pretty much hamstrung for the next few years trying to figure out, well, who's going to take that salary from us. And then meanwhile, you got to pretend like you've done everything that you plan to do, and hey, it's all good because our core three, we just taking those steps. Okay, well, what happens in a year or so when you're so far over the tax and you can't afford this one and that one? You got to give them away at a bargain. Then you're starting all over again from scratch.
Yeah.
And then, as you mentioned, also the clock starts ticking as soon as a team gets a franchise player, and then you start trying to surround him with other guys. The problem is so much of your money is going into these 3 and 4 and 5 players. Then so like I said, the economy, the people that can really figure it out financially, they are so valuable to these organizations. And they're, like I said, you talk about being behind the scenes, understanding, and then negotiating some of these contracts where you get a player to take less now and maybe get more later, or take a little bit of a discount now, and then you throw in, Jay, all these new max contracts. He's eligible for the veteran max, and it's, I don't even
The
understand
super max and all these
super
things.
max. Yeah,
Ooh, man.
don't even understand it.
And see, the thing that gets me, and you make a valid point. It is. I mentioned it early. Fiscal responsibility. So how can the management be responsible enough when fans say it's not my money? And as you mentioned, if they come into the games, then it is some of their money because they're putting it back in the coffers, so to speak. But it's knowing that, just for example purposes, the dude can get a $20 million contract, but my numbers or my data and what we've seen from him, he's probably more 15. And the fact that you offer somebody 15 as opposed to 20, I feel insulted. Therefore, I must go. And then the scales are tipped. The seesaw tips into the other favor. It seems like it's going to continue to be wild and crazy for that, because you mentioned the Suns. The Suns, they have those 3 max contracts, and what they're doing is almost the same thing that the Lakers did when they had Kobe and Shaq. They were trying to fill out the bench with minimum contract players, but the difference was those players and they weren't even minimum contract, but they were taking less than market value from what they had, like a Rick Fox, and the list goes on, because they wanted to win championships. I don't know if today's player, I say in air quotes, really cares about winning championships as opposed to making sure that they have enough commas in their bank account to make sure that they can do to support their entourage and their family, or just to say, I got the most out of my career finance wise, as opposed to how many rings, because those rings don't keep you warm when your career is over.
No, the bottom line is money for players, and you and I talked about it all the time. A lot of it depends where a player is in his career, but early on, these dudes want to get paid. And the common one of the common things we always hear, well, if they don't give it to them, that team will. Somebody's going to give it to them. So they're all, every player, and rightfully so. I mean, these players aren't out there, playing for free. Obviously, it's crazy to think with the millions and
Money.
millions of
I
dollars
mean,
that are out
just
there.
from 10 years ago, even the money was crazy 10 years ago, 20 years ago, but just from 10 years ago to now, when you see some of the contracts that are being signed, that is it for guys that are going to be at the end of the bench that are getting crazy amounts of money.
The question will always be said, though, Jay, if the owners are willing and able to pay these players what they're paying them, how much is going into their bank accounts? I mean, there's 2 sides to every story.
Yeah.
You're giving these players, 10 years, $350 million, and that's just one player. And you talking about all the other players you got to pay, and the concession people you got to pay, and your coaching staff, and go down the line, all the things that you're responsible for paying for, right? And
Right.
you're still making a profit. Something has to be said for, hey, the money has to go somewhere, and these players are rightfully trying to get theirs. Just it gets to a point though where it's almost silly though. Some of the money that's being thrown around, and to some of these players too. God bless them. But when I see some of the contracts of some of these guys, I'm like, wait a minute, who the hell is he? One, and does he really deserve that much money? But
Yeah.
the whole thing is, somebody's got to, when the salary caps were put out there, there's a minimum these teams can have to spend. So when they
Yeah.
get to a threshold, it's like, well, we better hurry up and spend this, otherwise we'll get in trouble, because you can't spend too much, you can't spend too little. So we
Yeah.
got to spend this money, and that's when you start throwing these contracts around to some of these players that aren't worthy of it, and then you got to be careful, because you'll halter the advancement of your team and organization by just throwing it around willy-nilly. You got to really be smart when it comes to some of these contracts, and at the same time players are trying to get there. So it's a wild west out there in terms of contracts, and we see each of these leagues trying to do something different.
Yeah.
I'll ask you a question. Who do you think is the best league in terms of, because we know baseball basically has no salary cap,
Yeah.
basketball has a salary cap with all kind of twists in it, and football seems to have the one that's pretty much, you can get away with a little finagling, but they don't let you get to, when you get near close to the salary cap in football, they're like, hey, you only got this much to spend. Well, you
Yeah.
never really hear that in basketball. Which one do you think is the best option?
This is the free market society, Javon, coming into play. Baseball. Why? Because baseball is just spend your money. If you got the money, spend the money, right? And I say that it's with basketball, with NBA being with basketball being my favorite sport. I love the way they dribble up and down the court. That would hurt teams now, like the Lakers, because the Lakers are not. They might be in LA, but they're not a big. They're not. They're a family run team. They're not run by not owned by a billionaire. So that would hurt. So I say that knowing full well. But I would prefer, if I would prefer that to open it up. But one of the things that I think that the NBA say does well is a lot of the veterans end up sticking around for longer because of maybe the roster size can help as well. But with the NFL, and you may be able to speak to this in terms of what you've noticed, because of the way the salary cap is, it's about the new breed coming in at the top of that funnel, and the dudes that are the older, whether that's 5 seasons, 6 seasons, 7 seasons, they get ushered out faster to bring in the new ones, because they don't want to have to pay the higher veteran, the veteran more money to stick around. So they rather just get some young dude that they can try to wear out.
Yeah, the NFL, every year you service you put in, you have a minimum you can make, and you can't accept $1 less. And what happens is you got this dude that named Ed Smith, that the for 3 or 4 year veteran. We got to pay him this much, but he's old as hell.
Hmm.
Or we can go get a younger model right out of college, fresher, not as much injury, maybe not as much experience, but we only have to pay him this much, and to fill out that last, bottom end of your roster, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And that's what happens to veterans in the NFL. You get squeezed out. Whereas, like you said, in basketball, they have exceptions, and you can accept the veterans minimum. Out of the veterans minimum. You'd have told me I could accept a veterans minimum and continue to play, I'd been like,
Yeah.
heck yeah, sign me up. But there's no such thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then obviously there's different sizes of the rosters and stuff like that. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's every league has their plus and minus. I'm not a big fan of. I know you like baseball. For me, there are so many like regional markets in baseball now. They're the
Yeah.
smaller markets. If you just go wild west like we have in previous decades, and with baseball, and the Yankees just outspent everybody. Now
Yeah.
you got Dodgers, Yankees, maybe even Cubs jump in there every now and then because of. But I mean,
You do have a point though, because it just seems ridiculous how the Dodgers just say, "Is that a good player? Yeah, we'll take him. Yeah, we'll
yeah,
take that dude too." They don't have a floor though in baseball. I don't believe that they have a
nah, I'm
floor.
not sure if they
They
do.
they have they have their salary cap kind of. Then you start to pay the whatever luxury and stuff, but they don't stop you if you blast right through it. They don't care.
Nah, baseball is, like I said, it's. And then the one thing we both discovered earlier this year with the Dodgers, how they get to continue to keep convincing players you don't even have to take the money now. We'll just pay it to you in 11, 12 years. Yeah, you seriously? Okay, yeah. I mean, I never knew what they
Whatever
were
you
doing
need.
on it.
You want a little bit now and a little bit later, we can do it. Whatever you
Hey,
need,
Tiny,
man.
we'll give you $700 million, but let's wait until 2034 to start giving it to you. Sure, that sounds good. In the meantime, I'll just make my little, all of my endorsements and stuff like that. I can live off that, and I'll just wait for you guys to pay me down the road. Hey,
Yeah,
why don't you do that too? And you do that too. It's like, wow.
yeah,
So, like I
yeah.
said, but somehow somebody in their organization, because if they're the first to do it, that mean they're the only ones that can do it. But
Right.
somehow they've cornered the market on that, and maybe other teams are doing it, but not to that extreme. And like I said, the Dodgers are being successful with it because there's
That's that.
no
That's that
way.
Bobby Bonilla deal, because every
Yeah,
day, every July 1st or 2nd, it's
yeah,
the
Bobby
Bobby
Bonilla
Bonilla day.
done.
But there are a lot of players that have done that, and that's that. Because if you don't think that you can do a good job of spending and managing your money now, and you got a payday coming 5, 6, 7, 10 years from now that's going to pay you for X amount of years, yeah, okay, I'll do that
Man,
because I know I got something coming.
yes, sir.
Yeah.
Somehow, like I said, the Dodgers have convinced players to take huge amounts later on.
Woo, woo.
Yeah.
Good Lord. So he's Ed Smith. I'm Javon Adams, Easy Sports Talk Show with Ed Smith and Javon Adams. So there was a story that came across that I came across on ESPN the other day. It was from the come on there. Okay. So it was what was it? Argentina played who was it? Yeah, okay. So Argentina had a 1-0 win over 1-0 win over Colombia in the final of a soccer tournament. And so what Argentina ended up doing, some of the players on that team ended up singing a racial slur towards some of the players on the Colombia team that were of African heritage, and so there's one of the things that I think the what is it, Chelsea is condemning one of the players that are on the Argentinian team for their discriminatory chant. There's some legislation that might be passed around, and all that's getting into some of the minutia there. But my question, since you played baseball and you played NFL, what did you ever have situations like that where either an opponent, whether maybe it was the fans from the opposing team or the maybe your opponents that were said some racial slurs your way or your teammates' way, and what I was curious. As soon as I came across it made me think of asking you that question.
Unfortunately, yes. You have to remember, especially during my minor league baseball days, Jay, I was, we talk about late 80s into the early 90s. And some of these small podunk towns we used to go through.
Yeah,
And, we were, a bunch of African American men on some of these teams. I played on teams that fielded all African American lineups sometime and Latin, and this was back in the late 80s. This game has changed a lot since then.
yeah.
And you got to remember, we were going through some of these small towns, and it wasn't taken lightly that we were coming through and rolling through and hitting the clubs at night and maybe running around with some of the young ladies in town and stuff like that. And some of the people that used to come to those games didn't necessarily like that too much. And I remember times when we'd be out there on the field, and things would get contentious, not even so much dugout to dugout, but from the stands. We heard the chatter and people, saying things to us and certain cities, and I'm not going to run out certain cities, but we know certain parts of the country. You got to remember, I played down south,
Mm-hmm.
deep south too. I'm talking Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky. I mean, I was all
Real
over
quick,
the place.
there was that what was it, the classic Willie Mays, when he passed away, he was going to go to the, what was it, the Negro League Classic, or that game, and Reggie Jackson was
Reggie
there. He
Jackson.
was on television talking about, because I think that was in Alabama, and he
Yeah,
was talking about just the amount of hatred that he had to endure, and not being allowed into different the different hotels and different restaurants. And this was in what, the 70s, late 60s, early
yeah.
70s. Yeah. So but yeah, go ahead.
I didn't quite experience that type of stuff because, like I said, we're talking late 80s, early 90s. I was never refused, to sit in a restaurant. I was never, told to, I couldn't ride in the front of the bus, or I've never experienced any of that. But we used to see the different smaller versions of racism, and whether it be someone saying something from the stands or looking at you crossways when we walk the street. Sometime
Hmm.
I remember one time, and this was crazy. I think this was California of all places in early '90s. I think it was like 1991. I was out in California playing with the Brewers at the time. I just got traded up to the play out there playing in the playoffs, and me and one of my black teammates, middle of the morning, late toward lunchtime, we figured we'd go grab a bite to eat before we went to the yard. And we're standing at a stoplight. We had just finished our food. Our hotel was across the street. Standing at a stoplight, a car pulls up next to us, and we both stop and look. And it was a white woman in the car. She did the classic. She reached over Jay from her driver's seat and clicked her locked
Yeah,
the door, and because we
yeah.
were standing on her passenger side, she reached over slowly, hit the and both myself, my teammate, and it was Tony Diggs. I remember to this day, we both looked at each other and we were like, "Oh my god!" And
Wow.
she didn't look straight. And that light turned green, and boom, she took off. I was
Yeah,
like, "Holy cow!" So whether she thought we were just some thugs on the street, uh, you know, that was eye opening for me. And like I
yeah,
said, I experienced all types of different things that were said from the stands, and some of it I wouldn't even repeat. It was just some stuff. People trying to get at you because who you are, who they think you are,
yeah,
and there were times when we wanted to go up there and get them, but you can't. You have to show that you got a little more common sense than that. But yeah, we experienced it. It was,
yeah.
and like I said, in this day and age, it's still going on. Sometimes we obviously see it over in Europe with some of these soccer players, especially.
Yeah, soccer, I don't care what nobody say. That it's almost as if it might not be discouraged, but it might not be encouraged, but it's not strongly
Man, they're out there
discouraged. Yeah,
throwing bananas at the players and
man.
stuff like that. I mean, it's like,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, wow, in this day and age. And you would think, because I've been over to Europe and you've been, they always claim to be a freer like, lifestyle and different, and there's like, imagine going to a stadium here and people throwing bananas at you and ooh, 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 and then all that kind of stuff, like a
Ooh,
monkey sound.
man.
I mean, but like I said, as bad as we think we have it over here sometimes, the rest of the world, golly, they're still a little behind us sometimes because that's the type of stuff that should just be happening. But it's out there.
Yes, indeed. So again, he is Ed Smith. I'm Javon Adams. We do this thing 3 times a week. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Tell a friend to tell a friend about what we got going on here. Go to easysportstalk.com. That's easysportstalk.com. Go to our YouTube channel as well. That's the Easy Sports Talk Show, the Easy Sports Talk Show. Subscribe, all that stuff. Share it with your friends. We do appreciate it. And as we like to say around this time, you can